Hi, I'm James Lamont, Fellow at the Vidine Center for Rural Economic Development at the University of Minnesota Crookston. Today we will continue our supply chain series with a focus on the pork industry and the disruption that occurred as a result of COVID-19. The biggest issue that occurred right away with COVID-19 was processing facilities across the country were shut down. This was due to mass infections at sites, but also prevention of mass infections given the workforce environment where people congregate together. As these processing facilities were being shut down, choke points occurred along the supply chain vertical. So people had nowhere to sell their hogs, but on the flip side of that, receivers of their product didn't have the capability to sell it, thereby driving up prices. Labor shortages ensued, and unfortunately, mass euthanization of hogs occurred as well because there was nowhere to send the supply. In effect, it created a backlog of roughly 3 million hogs. Many pork producers were forced to sell at high or at lower prices because they'd exceed 350 pounds or processing facility weights. So as a result, they'd take a loss of 70 or 80% if they were lucky. In other instances, they just simply killed their hogs. Simultaneous to that, downstream the supply chain, you saw massive increases in price because there just simply wasn't enough pork on the shelves, but then other inputs on the flip side of that were high as well. So the farm price spread was high, but it wasn't necessarily as high when compared to beef. Fast forward to today, and agricultural, or rather the ag tech environment is accelerating growth in the sector. So even with costs the way they are, you're starting to see mass automation, one that reduces costs naturally in the labor pool, but it also mitigates the likelihood for disruption in the future should another viral disaster occur or something else. Also, globally, you'll see from consumers a demand for sustainability, reduced deforestation. This is primarily in the global market because our markets are much more mature in the United States, and then naturally a carbon footprint reduction, given ESG preferences both on the investment side as well as on the purchasing side. Inflationary pressures continue at a rapid clip. Year over year, if you go buy bacon, it's 28% higher on average, but I was shocked the other day when it cost me $10 for a slab. But this will also further accelerate those cost-cutting measures, such as automation. You're also starting to see massive food supply chain realignment. So people in the West that consider themselves more environmentally conscious are buying less product, as well as the fact that prices have driven up demand, or rather driven down demand. And you're seeing a realignment as the growth in Asia for pork products continues to occur. So this will naturally influence the way the supply chain moves. In addition, margin volatility is always a problem, especially the lower you are on the supply chain vertical. And then these labor shortages continue across the United States just due to the fact that we have more jobs than workers right now. In all, it's a very unique situation that we're experiencing, but we're going to hear from a farmer, Mr. Tim Burrick, about his experience during the pandemic, and he'll also give some advice about what a young farmer could do moving forward in this situation. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning. I'm James Lamont, Fellow at the Vidine Center for Rural Economic Development at the University of Minnesota Crookston. I'm joined today by a farmer from Northeast Iowa, one with decades of experience, Mr. Tim Burrick, and he's here to tell us his story regarding the pandemic and how it impacted his pork farm. Mr. Burrick, welcome.
Good morning, James.
Good morning. Mr. Burke, if you don't mind, the pandemic impacted a lot of commodities, and we're still 18 months later reeling through just a unique series of events globally. At your farm and from your vantage point, what happened to the hog farm and your business during the pandemic?
I'll tell you my story, and then you can determine what happened. So
Okay.
my situation is I was a contract feeder. I contracted to buy 12-pound SEW pigs, and then I rented buildings and I fed the pigs out in those buildings, and then I contracted with the packer to sell those fat hogs. And I've been doing this for 9 years. So the pandemic hit, and I also need to say at the time I had 35,000 head of pigs in 14 different locations. And when the pandemic hit, naturally the packing plants started shutting down and they quit taking hogs. So suddenly when you're on a schedule to sell pigs and buy pigs, and I had contracts to deliver these pigs to the packer, They wouldn't take them. Well, now what do? Well, we started reducing the rations, doing whatever we could to slow the rate of gain, and we did that. But you know, pigs eat, and you starve them, and this went on for 2 weeks. We couldn't sell pigs, so suddenly we're getting to the point, they're getting so big, you don't know what to do. You can't take pigs, so I called my man on the other end and said, I can't buy your pigs because I can't sell pigs. Well, that messed him up. He was infuriated with me. He says, I'm going to sue you. I said, well, that won't help. I can't sell pigs. So I had problems on both ends. And it continues, that the packer they just basically shut down and didn't take them. So this was April, May, and finally, people started figuring out that maybe these packing plants aren't going to get going, and we've got to start disposing of pigs. So I went out and bought some guns, 5,000 rounds of ammunition. I contracted with the rendering plant out of Des Moines, and in early June, we were going to start on a Wednesday, start shooting pigs and loading them up in their semis and start hauling them to Des Moines at a cost of, I think it was $8,000 a load to haul them to Des Moines to get them rendered. It was either that or dig big pits and bury them. Then you had to have the DNR there to oversee that. Well, the Monday before the Wednesday, we decided we were going to have to start killing pigs. The packing plant said, well, we'll start taking a few. They started opening up, and they finally said, we get to you, we'll take a few. So through the month of June, instead of shooting pigs, they started taking pigs. Well, the problem was they were too big, and when you get over 350 pounds, you don't get your contract price, you get sow price. Well, suddenly I'm selling fat hogs that it should be bringing $120 or bringing $40. But it was better than shooting them and burying them, which I did not want to do. Mentally, I couldn't handle. I didn't know how we were going to do that. And I had people lined up, former military people that said they could shoot the pigs. And I had that part covered because I didn't think I could do it. And so we started working our way through. Unfortunately, the disruption was great. Tyson said, well, you're not getting the pigs that I need. And so they said, we've got force majeure. We're going to break the contract that you've got with us under force majeure. I had to break the contract with the guy I bought pigs from. The bank said, and here's the numbers, and here's the important thing. The bank said, because you're selling pigs for $40 instead of $120, we can't continue to finance you at this rate. So we're gonna not finance your hog business anymore. So through the last summer, the summer of 20, we just sold pigs, and the average loss was $80 a head by the time it was all done. So you multiply 35,000 times $80, it's almost $3 million that I lost through the business. I negotiated with the guy that supplied me pigs not to sue me, and we had a settlement. He went on to find other people. My contracts, Tyson severed my contracts because I wasn't going to honor them in the future. I told him, I guess I'm going out of the pig business. So everything that could go wrong did go wrong, except we didn't have to kill the pigs. So I'm out of the hog business today. How did I survive? Well, I sold 320 acres of land and refinanced the rest to cover my losses. And that's my story in the short term. But the disruption was great. The government said, well, you know, everybody thinks the government came in and helped. Well, I did get some money for pork, and you know, I up to 250,000. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but because I'm one person in one entity, that's the limit the government would pay. And so any row crop money that they would put out, which they did last spring under CFAP, you know, to help people through COVID, I didn't qualify for it because I'd reached my limit. So it was, the losses are about 2.8 to 3, and my government assistance is 250,000, and I ate the rest. And I'm out of the hog business today because it wasn't sustainable, according to the bank. And they were right, it wasn't sustainable. So to think COVID doesn't matter, you know, Tyson is still going. I'm done. The guy that supplied pigs, he's still going, but he had a major disruption in his business too. It was a mess. It was a horrible, terrible thing. And I don't know anyone else that experienced quite what I did, but I'm sure there's other people that ended up quitting the business because it wasn't worth the stress.
Tim, thank you. You know, you read about this, but it's always a story. You know, it's always something you read in the Star Tribune or the New York Times or something like that. And this really hits home. I mean, on a number of levels. You know, there is a perception that since the federal government has spent $6 trillion in coronavirus aid and or Federal Reserve, you know, programming, there is a perception that everybody's been made whole, and it's unfortunate to see that, you know, you were able to effectively recoup just 10% of your losses. And it seems people above and below in the supply chain vertical had better access to tools. So it's something that I hope policymakers look at moving forward, because it also impacted, as you said, the other side of your business, which is row crops, which were also impacted. So the problems are even worse. I had to ask, what advice would you have for you know, someone looking to get involved in the hog business? You know, knowing what you went through contractually and obviously the emotions, and I'm a former military guy myself, but I couldn't imagine doing that. It takes a special person, I guess, that grows up near livestock or something that's able to say, yeah, I can go ahead and do that on your behalf. And it's nice that you're able to find at least a home, even though it was at an $80 loss per unit or per animal. So what advice would you have for, you know, someone looking to get involved in this business?
Well, before I answer that question, James, I got to throw in a caveat. So then the government, just to show you how things work, the government came out with another CFAP program for hog people. And they said, for those of you that had to shoot the hogs and bury them or render them, you know, we'll cover that up to 80% of your losses. And so just this week, I went back and I said, is there anything we can do? And they said, did you shoot the pigs? No. I said, I delivered them. Well, then you don't qualify. I'd have been much better off financially had I shot, killed them, and rendered them the way it's turned out with the government programs. So it's just amazing how individuals can fall through the cracks. And it just, you know, you try to do the right thing and you just get hammered. So that's that. Now, as far as young people getting in business, you know, most young people now are getting in business where they don't own the livestock. It's unfortunate they don't, but in my area, you know, they're building buildings and providing the labor and taking care of pigs. And that looks like that's the way the integration is taking place. I tried it the other way, and I tried to compete with the integrators, and I found out you can't. And I was told I wasn't big enough. They said, if you would sell us 1 million pigs a year, we would negotiate purchase price and better terms. But I was only 50 to 100,000 a year, and I was just too small. So size is important. Control of your pigs from farrowing to finish is equally important, so you can control that health. I didn't do that. and health was always an issue. And then COVID hit, and health again was an issue, this time on the human side. But it impacts you. So if you're going to be in the pig business, if you're going to own the pigs, you've got to have tight control of from one end to the other, or at least on the farrowing side, great health control.
Well, thank you. Do you think beyond government help, like, is there anything the region can be doing to make or to enable a more resilient? I mean, COVID was just unique on so many levels, and it continues to be. But do you think there's something the Midwest as a whole could do to create a more resilient supply chain, whether it's for pork or for other commodities? I mean, the answers are kind of similar, but I'm curious from your vantage point, now that you reflect on what happened, 15 months ago, which is very alive and well. I mean, you got it down to the day, and you're still living it. And so what could the region have done, or what could they do in the future to prevent or at least mitigate this type of situation from occurring again?
I don't know. I wish I could tell you, James, and say this could be done. COVID was so unique, and still is. We had no way to deal with it, and I don't blame anybody for my situation, but I sure got caught in it, and I'm just disappointed I couldn't qualify for more government assistance, because I paid the price, I paid my debts. But I think what's coming is more automation, especially at the packing end. Anything they can automate over time, they're going to. I think that, and I just expect that to happen. And I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah, in fact, many states actually incentivize it, just because we're dealing with such short-term and long-term workforce shortages, that any areas we can alleviate pressures in, say, the human capital supply chain, we're doing. I don't know what that looks like 50 years from now, but I can tell you, at least over the next 10 years, that's certainly something that's trending, and it's trending quickly on all ends of the agricultural supply chain. So, well, Mr. Burke, I want to thank you. I know it's not an easy story, but it's one that needs to be told so that people understand from a farmer's perspective or an integrator's perspective what it's like. And I'm just very thankful and grateful that you were willing to tell your story today.
Well, it's an interesting story, and I don't know if it's unique. But I lived it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.